We want to feel known for who we are and we want to not be so alone. And it's interesting, the corporate world or academia, buttoned up academia, I started noticing like in these meetings, nobody is sharing their actual feelings about this. We're sharing our thoughts, we're dancing around. And I just realized how pervasive this is, the holding back. I'm not saying we should reveal everything all the time, but I think that most of us stand to benefit tremendously from revealing a little bit more a lot of the time.
Welcome to Passion Struck. Hi, I'm your host, John R. Miles, and on the show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of the world's most inspiring people and turn their wisdom into practical advice for you and those around you. Our mission is to help you unlock the power of intentionality so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you're new to the show, I offer advice and answer listener questions on Fridays. We have long-form interviews the rest of the week with guests ranging from astronauts to authors, CEOs, creators, innovators, scientists, military leaders, visionaries, and athletes. Now, let's go out there and become Passion Struck. I am so excited today to welcome Leslie John to Passion Struck. Leslie, how are you today?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to open today up in kind of an unusual way. I understand that you are good friends with Allison Brooks, and
Oh, yes. She was just texting me actually. She's getting her hair done. She's reading my book in the hair. So we share the same stylist, and they just texted me a photo of the stylist, and Shanine and Allison. She's sitting in the chair reading my book. It was so cool.
that is awesome. I had Allison, and for the listeners, the episode is Allison Woodbrooks. You'd have to search for it like that. But it was such a fan favorite because she teaches the course around talking. It's like some crazy name, like the fun of
It's
talking gooder in life or something
even,
like
yeah,
that.
exactly. How to talk gooder in life or something like that. Exactly. I love it. So cheeky.
Today, we're going to be talking about the science and power of opening up, but I brought Allison up on purpose because when we were doing that interview, we were talking about like this lost art of connection that so many of us have. And she and I were talking through that when you're really paying attention to someone, it's almost like holding a mirror up to yourself because
Mm.
in the other person, through their stories, you also see your own journeys and it helps you relate to them in more ways. Does that
Mhm.
resonate to you?
That's so well put. Beautiful.
So I thought, given that I knew the two you work together and I'd heard you talk about her on other podcasts, I thought I would start there.
Yeah.
But today we are talking about your brand new book. And one of the most moving narratives follows John and Grace, whose relationship
Mm.
you cover in the book. And I want you to talk about it, but it collapsed not from conflict, but from withheld vulnerability. And I was hoping you could start there.
Sure, yes. So Grace and John had this whirlwind romance when they were in college. He was an exchange student from Australia, and they just really bonded and fell in love quickly. But he lived in Australia, and there's this pivotal moment in their young relationship where she'd cashed in all her savings and she was going to jump on a plane and go be with him for at least the summer, and they'd been planning this, and just before she left for the airport, she kinda had she needed reassurance, and so she called him. She said, "Do you want me to come?" And he said, "If you want to," or something like that, and then she didn't get on the plane because she didn't feel it, that she felt, as in she loved him and wanted to be with him, but she wanted him to express how he felt, and so they eventually broke up and married other people, had their own families. And then years later, something like 20 years later, they, as happenstance had it, they connected. And also, as happenstance or fate had it, he had just gotten divorced and she had just gotten divorced. And so 20 years later, they got together and they said all the things that they didn't say when they had in their youth that they had wanted to say, but were too scared to say. to the demise of their relationship, and then they finally 20 years later became reunited, and now they're married, and John moved to the US and they're together, and I interviewed them for the book, and it was so lovely because I was talking to Grace, and then John was in the other room, and he was, like, overhearing and making, like, these loving and snide remarks, and then I'm like, "Bring him over here," and then we were all talking together, and, you could just feel their warmth and their love for each other.
Well, I love it, Leslie. And you argue that we worry too much about oversharing or TMI and not enough about undersharing or TLI, too little
Yeah,
information.
I know,
What are
we don't
we
even have a word for it. Now we do.
what do you think we're getting wrong culturally?
Ah, that's such a great question. It's interesting because I think when you say culturally, where my mind goes is the the cultural influences on us, and perhaps they're no more apparent than with children, right? I have small children, I have 2 small boys, and there is this cultural imperative almost to, like, perform invulnerability sometimes, right? If someone shares their feelings in, like, I'm thinking of my own work in a senior faculty meeting at HBS. At one time, I said, "I'm feeling frustrated," and people were like, "Mm." But yet when you do that, it unlocks so much. After I said that, people were like, "Mm," but then also finally we got to the core of what our barrier was. And so on the cultural point, especially, I think there's also the gender norms too. I think it's especially problematic for males. I have 2 young boys, and one of the studies as I was writing the book that really struck me was this study on preschoolers, so 3 and 4-year-olds, and what they did was they video recorded their faces as the children were watching a scary movie. They also recorded the sweat on their skin, on their hands. It's called, of course, the galvanic skin response, which it measures how physiologically stressed out you are. The sweatier your hands, the more stressed you are. And what they found is that there was this relationship between showing on your letting your expression show on your face and stress. Specifically, when you let it out, you had a very expressive face, you were less stressed out, you were less sweaty. Put differently, the children who held it in, they were more stressed physiologically, and this is like a really hardcore measure, right? It's like the body doesn't lie. And the thing that really struck me here when you talk about the cultural element is that by the time the children were in kindergarten, so like 1, 2 years later, a gender difference had emerged whereby the little boys were not showing it on their face anymore. They were holding things in, which also meant the logic would follow that they were more physiologically stressed. And we know that comes with all kinds of negative implications. And so that really was one of those studies that jolted me awake on this issue.
I got the opportunity to interview Dan Pink when his book, The Power of Regret, came out. And we
Mhm.
spent a lot of talk about this regret survey that he did
Yes.
globally that
So
he
cool.
thought wasn't gonna amount to much, and before he knew it, he's getting thousands and thousands and thousands of people writing in,
Mhm.
and what he found is some of the biggest regrets came from the things we didn't say or do, like the story you mentioned. Why do you
Mhm.
think silence is so
Totally.
costly?
Totally. Yes, that's so spot on. I mean, that jives with so much research on regret that in the long run, the things we end up regretting are the things we didn't do. And so, what self disclosure that means, we regret the things we did not say, what wish we had, over the kind of stupid, regrettable things we say in the moment. And John and Grace are a perfect example of how, like, in the book, I talk about what they actually said, but then I interviewed them. So 20 years later, and I know what they actually were feeling. And what she meant to say is, do you still love me? I still love you so much. And I want to be sure, right? I need assurance. And that's human and that's normal. But yet we have to kind of pretend as if, like, we don't need assurance. And so I think that, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. I want to make sure I answer your question. I'm getting caught up in their love story, which I love.
I was wondering why is our silence or
Ah,
what we
yes.
didn't do, like these regrets, why is that so costly?
Yes. It's costly because the things that we don't say that we should say, they the negative symptoms of that show up in all kinds of ways. largely in the form of missed opportunities. So, John and Grace, not saying how you actually felt means that the love that could have blossomed then did not. It's colleagues that never quite trust you. If you're a leader and you project, like so many of us, this uber confident facade, really, your employees are never going to quite trust you because you're not real. And yet, the challenge here is that these missed opportunities are very harmful. You're missing out on love, you're missing out on well-being, you're missing out on influence. But because they're missed opportunities, if you flip the side of it and you say, "What about oversharing?" Okay? So I say something, I maybe cross the line with some humor or sass, and I immediately get negative social feedback. I see people grimacing. I see people like looking like a bit aghast. And that we're so exquisitely sensitive to negative social feedback that we massively kind of overweight that. And we live in fear of this cringy situation of the disclosure hangover, right? When you say a little too much, you get negative social feedback. And so the next time that you have an opportunity to reveal, you remember that and you feel like staying silent is the safe option. But you're right. The message I really want to share is that silence is not neutral. Silence is costly. Silence has risks, silence has rewards, just like speaking up. But when we make these decisions of what to reveal and not, we have a really lopsided way of evaluating them. We fixate almost exclusively on the risks of revealing. And that's, of course, very problematic.
And one of the things that is problematic across society now is the epidemic of loneliness. And
Yeah.
I was just doing an interview with Gordon Flett and a fellow Canadian, and
Yeah. Whoop,
we
whoop.
were talking about how loneliness, through his research, he's connected it to antimattering. But I think
Mhm.
it's also connected to our fear of revealing ourselves. And
Mhm.
this is
Mhm.
something you've written about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what is that connection?
Definitely. Revealing sensitive information, self-disclosure is one of the best and most important ways that we create connections with others. Yet we shy away from it because it feels risky. And it is risky, but that's part of the point. It's precisely because of the social risk it entails that we forge bonds when we do it. And so, for example, when I share something sensitive with you, like a weakness of mine, like I'm working on being, you can see this phrase organized, but I'm just so messy. But when I share something sensitive to you, it's a bit of a social risk. And I am showing that I trust you because when I share something sensitive, it entails risk. So I'm relinquishing control to the universe. And I'm saying through my actions implicitly, I trust you. I trust you to not make a fool out of me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be revealing this. Right. And so by showing I trust you via taking the social risk, it causes you to trust me, and that mutual trust is the foundation of friendships, of intimacy, of colleagueships, and so on. And so that's really the core thing that's going on of why self disclosure fights loneliness and why holding back doesn't do us any good.
Leslie, I used to take trips to Australia a lot. I
Yeah.
used to work for this company called Lendlease, and
Mhm. Yes.
they
Yes.
have very different customs there. And
Mhm.
one of their customs is to eat raw squid. And so there was this time where I had just gotten off
I love this.
an airplane, and I joined my friend Richard, who has a sailboat, and over there for high wealth individuals, sailboats at once upon a time were a way for them to write off their taxes because their taxes there are so high. But we get on this sailboat with a bunch of his friends, and they break out these raw, disgusting octopi, and I am, here in the States, we don't eat raw octopus. I'm not sure how this is a delicatessen anywhere, but I do not want to partake in this, but I'm feeling because it's a bunch of jocks, a bunch of rugby players, and I'm one, that
Yeah.
I've got to go through with it. And I
Mhm.
understand you had a similar experience with raw steak tartare.
I
Uh,
sure did. First, tell me I'll tell you my story. First, tell me how it went, like, did you like it? Was it s as
oh
slimy
my
and gross as I imagined it to be?
It was horrible. I mean, I'm trying to eat this thing, and I don't even know how to describe it. It is just like a gob of gook in your mouth. I mean, imagine eating like a huge snail, because this thing is probably the size of a golf ball, if not a little bit bigger. So
Oh, wow.
it's like chewy, and it's just,
And,
so
like, spurting and
the whole
yeah.
time I felt like I'm about ready to puke, and they're all laughing because 'cause I'm probably turning green, and I'm watching them just eat it with raw delight, and I ended up
Yeah.
getting it down, but, was like,
Oh,
"Why in the world did I do that?" Why don't I just say, I have no interest in eating that?" But the
right,
same thing has
right.
happened to me in China when you eat crazy food over there.
My own food aversion story. When I was a baby academic, I went to Berkeley to give a talk, and 2 of the most senior scholars there, they're married, and they invited me for dinner at their house. So I was on my best behavior. I was super excited. I was also a little nervous. And I'm walking through the Berkeley Hills. It's so beautiful. I show up at their door and they're like, "Welcome. We're so excited you're here. We walked to the market today and we got our favorite cut of meat." I'm sure they didn't say meat. They said something more elegant. And we made steak tartare for you. And my heart sank because I've tried it and I just don't like it. And I know I've always felt a little ashamed because it's like I'm supposed to like highfalutin things, right? Well, I don't like steak tartare, but I didn't tell them because I was trying to impress them. And same, it was like very generous servings of steak tartare, like 2 giant tennis balls of it. And so, yeah, I got through it. I ate it. But you know what I was thinking as I was thinking of Mr. Bean, who I love. I love Mr. Bean so much. And there's this amazing sketch of Mr. Bean, the mime, who he makes these delightful social commentaries. I call them social commentaries. They're hilarious, these awkward situations people are in. And then he makes us laugh about them. And so he's at a restaurant and he orders steak tartare, doesn't realize that it's raw flesh. The fancy waiter comes out and makes a big great display, and then Mr. Bean's aghast, and then he proceeds to try to hide it. So he takes like a dollop and he puts it in the woman's purse behind him. He sticks him in the vase. Like, God forbid he actually say what he thinks and that he doesn't love it. And so, but it's interesting because writing the book, I have stories like this in the book, and they're not just gratuitous. It's because I realized, like, it's made me reflect on, like, what would have been the harm? I kept my mouth shut. There was certainly some harm, I mean, lowercase harm, like, whatever, I ate something I didn't like, but there was a cost of hiding, is what I'm saying. And if I think back, I'm like, well, what if I had just said it's not my favorite thing? I mean, they're so nice. Surely they wouldn't have wanted me to be suppressing my gag reflex, and they would have offered me something different. And maybe even would have had a good laugh over it. They would have teased me about it. And then we would have been maybe connecting, becoming more friendly with each other. So I kind of imagine this alternate world. And that's the core thing that I kept coming back to in doing this work is like, what's the harm of sharing? And we're not really thinking about these things in an even handed way often. And even like some of my most embarrassing, cringy stories in the moment, I, the next morning I had a disclosure hangover. I'm like, oh my God, it's like I just poured gasoline all over my body and lit a match. Like, what have I done? Career suicide, whether it's crying in front of an audience or sharing my most embarrassing story with senior colleagues, I've done it all. And, you know, I regretted it in the moment, but then when I was writing the book, I was reflecting back and thinking, well, what about the long game? Those 2 fancy profs that I told my most embarrassing story to when I was a baby academic, they have become my closest mentors. And I don't think it's in spite of what I shared. I think it is partly because of what I shared. Because again, this idea that when you say something a little vulnerable, a little edgy, it has these benefits of making people trust you and rapport.
Yeah, it really does, and I found this through my corporate career, that it
Mm,
it seems like when you, like, reveal an embarrassing truth or something unknown about you, people tend to lean in more than if you're more secretive.
completely.
What does that teach us, because you're a behavior scientist, about human behavior?
I mean, I think that part of this is that we want to feel known for who we are and we want to not be so alone. And, it's interesting, the corporate world or academia, buttoned up academia, I started noticing like in these meetings, nobody is sharing their actual feelings about this. Like we're sharing our thoughts, we're kind of dancing around. And I just realized how pervasive this is, the holding back. I'm not saying we should reveal everything all the time, but I think we should be reveal I think that most of us stand to benefit tremendously from revealing a little bit more a lot of the time. And one of the most powerful things to reveal is our feelings, where because one of the reasons is that they're so credible. Feelings, I want us to stop thinking about feelings as like woo woo things. Feelings are really really solid information and they're really compelling. And when you're in a meeting at work, and the workplace even is a place for feelings, believe it or not. You're in a meeting and you're not getting anywhere and you're talking in circles, you can say, I'm feeling frustrated. And when you do that, you'll see that it changes everything, because it turns out that if you're feeling frustrated, probably everyone else is. And when you name it, it's like this release valve that, okay, now we can really get down to it. Now we can realize, okay, well, we're not meeting our goals here, whatever. Like it kind of opens this ability to communicate clearly. And yet, we're very scared of it. I'm, of course, not saying we should say all of our most vulnerable feelings. The more sensitive the feeling or the thought, the riskier it is. And especially in workplace context, we need to be very careful about that.
I have a good friend, Erin Deal, and she was taught at Second City how to do improv. And she's
Mhm.
now takes this concept of improv and she goes into many corporate environments and facilitates meetings or goes in and helps struggling teams through the use of it. And I think
Mhm.
loosening up like that, or allowing yourself to do yes and to those
Exactly.
around you, I think opens up so much more discussion and commonality amongst your
Mhm.
peers.
Yeah.
And where I wanted to go with this is another person that you work with at Harvard, whose research I love, is Amy Edmondson's. If the listener is not familiar with Amy, is kind of the person who, when you think about psychological safety, you think of Amy. How does an environment where you're not allowed to reveal impact someone's psychological safety?
Oh, geez. Yes. I mean, it's antithetical to psychological safety, right? And it's not just the psychological safety, it's antithetical to their well-being, right? There's so much research on how holding things back, concealing, holding secrets, it's very effortful for your brain. And in fact, it takes a toll on your mental and physical well-being. It even takes a toll on your IQ. So we all want our employees to be on their game. Well, if we don't let them say what's on their minds, it can be preoccupying and their performance may suffer. And I guess then the question becomes, to me, I think leaders have a really tremendous opportunity to help here, where when the leader goes first, when the leader shares something vulnerable, when the leader shares that they're pathologically messy, maybe don't say it that way, but like, I'm working on my organizational skills. We have found this in study after study that when the leader does this in a metered way, it causes, and I don't say the C word lightly as a scientist, it causes their employees to trust them more. It causes their employees to be more motivated to work for them. And so leaders have a real opportunity for this. Another thing that, speaking of psychological safety, that's really cool, it's new research by Nicole Abbey Esber. She's a professor at London Business School. She's looked at the role of eye gaze. So when you're in a meeting, some people speak, some people are less comfortable speaking. The people who are less comfortable speaking are no less valuable, of course, they're just more reserved. So how do you nudge them to speak up? Now, you could cold call them and say, "Leslie, what do you think?" But also people who are reticent to speak up, that's a bit of a hard, not harsh, but heavy-handed way of doing it. There's actually a more subtle and elegant, and I think even more powerful way of doing it as a leader, and that is making eye contact with them. So Nicole has found that when a leader, especially someone who has high status in a meeting, looks the person in the eye, like not I'm doing it exaggeratedly, not in a creepy way, but like turns their eye gaze to the quiet person, that's this nonverbal cue that's very powerful and very interpretable. And I dare say the automatic response is for that person to, they for sure feel more included, number one, and safe. And number two, they're more likely to speak up.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm just trying to think through my own time
Mm.
and eye contact or non eye contact and how that changes. When I was at Arthur Anderson years ago, we had a full time person on staff who would come to each of the offices. And she used to be in the FBI, and she used to train FBI agents. How do you tell if someone is lying or not
Mm.
based on their
Mhm.
body language? And so
Yep.
she would come in to teach us what body language we shouldn't do, and one of them had
Mhm.
to deal with eye contact. But it was crazy, even things of how a person crosses their legs, what direction they cross them. Do they pause before they say something? Do they gulp? Does their eyes twitch? She gave us all these things to look for. But what you were saying with eyes, I mean, it really does come into the trust circle in a big way. So I'm so
Mhm.
glad you showed
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, completely, completely. Yeah.
So, one of the things that your work shows is that people keep around 13 secrets at any given time. What kinds of things are we hiding?
Yeah, so this is wonderful work by my colleague Michael Slepian and Malia Mason at Columbia University. And yeah, they developed this questionnaire to ask people what kind of secrets they keep. And one of the common categories of secrets is secrets around like things in your romantic relationships, intimacy, sex. People keep secrets about that. People keep secrets about their finances, and those things that people keep secrets about are very much jibe with my own research, where, for 20 plus years, I've been asking people sensitive questions in various ways. And one of the most, yeah, again and again, the most sensitive things are things, romantic relationships, details about those are very sensitive, finances are sensitive. And so there are these common patterns. And it's a bit of a paradox because the more sensitive the thing, the less comfortable we are sharing, but the less we talk about it, the more anomalous and sensitive it becomes, right? So when we break this and start sharing, it really helps to destigmatize, that's a strong word, or make us feel more human and not ashamed of the things that are just really human and natural. One of the terms that I like to use to refer to this is called when someone who reveals something in a really courageous way and it helps others to not feel stigmatized, for example. It's called a catalyst confession. And a prime example of that is, of course, Magic Johnson. Remember, in the 90s, HIV was very, very stigmatized in the sense it was kind of thought to be the gay disease. And there was a lot of stigma around that and tons of misunderstandings about how it's actually contracted. And Magic Johnson comes into the conference room in the 90s. And, it's this epic moment. You can still see it on YouTube where he walks into this conference room in a hotel in LA and he announces his retirement from the Lakers because he had contracted HIV. And that was just a complete shock and, very sad, of course, but also very courageous. And his doing of that, his courageous reveal, scientists have studied its impact and they have been able to find to detect that his saying that in the 90s, in the subsequent months and years, caused people to get tested who wouldn't have otherwise been tested. So like that is a beautiful catalyst confession. It's does social good, right? And I think it's the leaders in society, the people that are held in high regard that have such a opportunity there.
I think we saw the cross, speaking of secrets, of Charlie Sheen's way that it came out and how
Yeah.
different it was
Yeah.
between the two. I have a confession to make, a
Ooh,
secret.
juicy.
So I interviewed Michael Slepian, and
Uh-huh.
we do this whole hour long interview,
Mhm.
and I get done, and I look down and my computer says, "You ran out of space, so this was not
Oh,
recorded."
that's the
And
worst.
and so Michael is still on, and I'm like, "You are not gonna believe it, and I am so sorry, but it didn't take. So I understand if you don't want to re-record this." But he was so genuous about it. He said, "I need to make a
Yeah,
couple calls.
yeah,
So let's come back in about 20 minutes." And we
yeah,
re-recorded it. And then when we were
yeah,
done, we
yeah,
were both so happy we re-recorded it because it was such a better second interview
yeah,
because he had
yeah.
misspoken about something that he wished he could have
Mhm.
worded differently, and I asked questions differently because I had more familiarity, and and that episode turned out to be great. But
Amazing, amazing. I have a confession too in that vein where I was doing a podcast a few months ago and I was not in a good headspace going into it. There was a bunch of things going on that day. And also the video wasn't working. Like it was just a comedy of errors, but we went through with it. And then a week or so later, the host emailed me and he's like, because you study revealing, I'm telling you this. I think the episode could be way better. He's like, "Do you wanna record it again?" And I'm like, "Yes, what a gift." I had been ruminating about it too, but me, the person who studies this, it honestly didn't even occur to me to say, "Hey, reach out to him." I could have reached out to him and say, "I think that we could make a much better powerful we could have a better conversation." It didn't even occur to me to share that. And then we re-recorded it and it was so much better. But that's a really important point because I think of, you asked why do we undershare and what we think silence is neutral, which is all of those things are valid. I think a fundamental even first order problem is more basic than that, which is that it doesn't even occur to us to share. We don't even think we're feeling frustration in a meeting. We don't even think to share our feelings. Like it doesn't even occur to us. And as an example of this, the way I often talk about this in class is I take people through kind of a day in the life, boring Leslie John. And what I do is I keep track, but that's part of the point, right? Even the most mundane day, there's so many missed opportunities. So what I do is I keep track of the things I said, and then I also keep track like a tally of the things that I thought but I didn't say. So like I'll just do the first beginning of it with you so you can get a feel for it. But so I wake up in the morning. I'm writing this down right now. I'm doing a little tab. This is real data collection on the fly, real science. So I have a column that says said and a column that says unsaid on the back of a health summary statement thing from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Okay, I told you I'm messy. So I wake up in the morning, I roll over in bed, I say, "Good morning, Collie," my hubby. What I don't say is, "I slept terribly." When I don't sleep well, I'm unhinged. I don't say that. We get into the bathroom, we're brushing our teeth, staring in the mirror. What I think is, I feel older than I thought I would at this age. And how come I still have acne? I'm in my 40s. Jeez. We get down to the kitchen. He starts making the kids lunches. He says, "What do they want for snack, Les?" I say, "I don't know. Stop asking me. I don't want to make decisions." That's what I say. What I don't say is I'm exhausted. I need a hug. I have a big presentation. I'm feeling nervous. Okay, so we're not even at breakfast and the very serious data collection we have done here, you can see there, is the unsaid is 8 and the said is 2. My point isn't that we should say all of the things that are on our mind all the time. You don't want that. I don't want that. But rather, we should consider saying these things. And those, until I started really actually writing the book, I didn't realize myself how many times I didn't even consider, right? So the old me wouldn't have even considered talking to Colin about telling him what I thought about aging. And yet you can see that if I had shared that, that would be intimacy enhancing in my relationship, right? In the sense that, like, feeling known for who you really are, having a partner that understands your thoughts and feelings is just one of the best ways to have a secure relationship. It's so deeply intrinsically fulfilling. Not to mention the fact that he probably would have said something that, like, was interesting or made me feel better. If I had told him that I hadn't slept well, I wouldn't have snapped at him in the kitchen with the lunches, right? He would have been like, "Oh, LJ needs kid gloves today because she's exhausted," but he can't read my mind. And so you see that by not sharing, you see one, how much withholding we're doing, and two, that if we shared a little more, we would often be better off. But it's of course not saying we should say all the things, like we withhold for good reason. You get into work, your assistant says, "How are you doing?" I say, "Great," which is good. Like, I don't wanna burden her with, like, "I have a big meeting, I feel overwhelmed, I haven't slept." Like, there's a time and a place. We often withhold out of kindness because of power asymmetry, because we don't have time, whatever it is, even for strategic reasons, but we should consider revealing more than we do.
So in that scenario, how much of that not revealing for many people comes down to shame or fear of judgment?
Oh, I mean, some of it, for sure. I think that, the my body image, that specific example, I do think that, there is we withhold things even from our partners. Like, this is the one person in the world that I be able to say anything to, and even then. And so I think that, yes, some of it is our own feelings, but I also think that once you share more, you realize the shame goes away. So now, like, writing this book was like the therapy I didn't know I needed, because it wasn't until I was writing it that I was putting the stuff in practice. It's one thing to know the science, it's another thing to actually do it. And writing the book made me do it. And now that I share my feelings with my husband, when I tell him how I feel, it's our relationship is even stronger. It's unbelievable the benefits.
So, as I was writing my first book, Passion Struck, I studied Irving Goffman's
Yes.
work. And in the book, I write about how for so many of us, we go through life wearing a mask, and we are really performing life instead of living life, if I have his work
Yeah.
summarized
Yeah.
appropriately. How
Yep.
does
That's
that
apt.
self presentation that we think is helping us actually blocking our connection to others?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think the self-presentation, it can inhibit the deepening of relationships, right? So here's an example, which was when I'm thinking back, I'm being transported back to this scene when I was interviewing for academic jobs. And so it's like at a hotel and you're moving around the hotel and interviewing with various universities. So the candidates move around and I'm in the elevator. I get on the elevator and clearly there's another candidate there. And so the door closes. We're literally in a steel vault. And I say to him, "Oh, I'm just so exhausted." Like, I just had this moment of like letting my guard down, taking the mask off. And what the fellow candidate did was, well, he straightened right up. He secured his mask even further and he said, "Oh, I'm having such a great time. This is such an amazing opportunity to share my research with all these professors." And then, no, 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 no. He did the like tap dance, which, you know, I- and then and he's become a very established scholar, and I see him at conferences occasionally. And you know, I've always remembered that interaction or non-interaction in a way, and I've never felt the desire to kinda chat him up at conferences. And I play the other side in my mind of, like, imagine if he had taken that self-presentation veil off for just one moment in a steel vault with another person that she like, right? So it's safe, it's so safe. And if he had done that, then maybe like imagine if he had said like, "Oh, I was in this interview just now. You'll never believe what happened. This like crazy thing. It was so funny," or whatever. Like, and then that would have like bonded us. Like, we maybe would have been friends for life. So yeah, the facade is, of course, there's a time and a place to not really show how you're feeling. But again and again, more often than not, I'm like, I don't know. Like kids is another example of where we feel like we need to be perfect around them and not show them. And I think that's exactly wrong, because then the child learns that, like, when the child feels strong feelings or something negative or something that they're ashamed of, then they feel it's even worse. They feel more anomalous because you're so perfect. And so my husband and I were really trying to make a point of, like, when we make a mistake or when we disappoint them, like, we try not to, but when we do, we talk about it. And I think that's really important.
Leslie, last year I had the reigning Miss America on the show, and I had her on
Oh,
because she was an Air Force Academy graduate and was one of the first, if not the first, military officer to ever get the crown. But in chapter 5,
love it.
The Why of Disclosure Decisions, you have this
Mhm.
iconic example of Miss Universe final questions.
I know.
And I was hoping you could maybe for the audience analyze the three contestants'
Great.
answers.
Yes, I love beauty pageants. I have a lot of strong feelings about them in all ways. They're fascinating too, right? As a social scientist, they're just so interesting. So, this was the Miss Universe, I believe it was 1998, and it was down to the final question. And so, this is a very high stakes thing where the contestants get one question they have to answer on the spot. Often it's not in their native language, and that they are judged for it. And then the winner is crowned afterwards. So it's very consequential and nerve wracking. So in 1998, it came down to three contestants, and one of them, Miss Venezuela, who, fun fact, was wearing white, which is the color that is statistically most likely to win in beauty pageants. So she was wearing white. And the question is asked, and it's if you could be crazy and do whatever you want for a day, what would it be? And she says something like, "I would magically fly from place to place." And, that was okay, but I would say, post hoc analysis. Number 1, this is incredibly nerve-wracking for to do what they did. So, I have to say that before I, like, critique them, but the disclosure analysis I would have of that is that was a little safe, TLI, too little information, right? It wasn't sparky, it was kinda boring, kinda dull. The next one, Miss Trinidad and Tobago, she said she would not wear clothes. And then I think there might have even been an audible gasp because that's pretty risque for a more conservative beauty pageant crowd, at least at the time. And so that was TMI in that context. Now, in a looser environment, maybe that would have been a fun topic, but in not in this situation. And then Miss USA, her name is Brooke Mahalani Lee, and she comes out. She's in this beautiful royal blue, funky, spunky gown, and she says, "I would eat everything. You do not understand. I would eat everything in the world twice." And there's just uproarious laughter, and that was magical. That was the sweet spot. It was a little gutsy, a little risky, right? For a beauty queen to admit that she loves eating. And so that is a nice example of that Goldilocks spot between TMI, too much information, and TLI, too little information. It's often very narrow and it's so context dependent. But I love that example because Brooke really nailed it. Well, when I was writing the book, I was able to track her down and interview her. And so I played the clip for her and I was like, walk me through what you're thinking, what's going through your mind. It was, what, 20 ish, 20 plus years later. And she said 30 more like, right? And she said, you know, that wasn't just any blurt. That was agentic because what was going on at that time was that Donald Trump, he owned it, and
Yep.
he was thinking about instating a weight clause. That meant that the winner, if she gained a certain number of pounds, she would lose her title. And Brooke was like she was like an activist against this. She thought this is not right. And so that her message was actually not only was it perfect in sense of like navigating that line between TMI and TLI, it was a catalyst confession, right? Like she made a statement with it. And sure enough, like things did change a little bit in the beauty pageant. I think because of her courage.
I love this story, and I wanted to make sure we captured that one because I think
Yeah,
it
thanks.
explains so well. Chapter 6, The Healing Power of Revealing, I
Mhm.
felt was really the scientific heart of your book.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna go back to Gordon Flett because when we
right.
were talking about mattering impacts the brain's threat response when you don't feel it. It
Mhm.
When you don't feel mattering, it impacts immune function, depression, anxiety, and recovery, and it
Mhm.
impacts people's mental and physical well-being.
Yeah.
And what was interesting to me as I was reading the book in this chapter is the power of revealing kind of impacts the same things.
Yes, completely, completely. You know, you're right, that's the scientific core of the book. There's so much amazing research on the power of opening up even privately, like, the power of putting your the catas well, I'm the catastrophic thoughts that are swirling around in my brain, when I put them on paper, when I translate them into words, that process is so potent in helping us to feel better about the issue, and it seems so silly, right? Because like, what's the difference between my brain and privately writing things down? Well, the process of putting words on your feelings activates a different part of your brain, a more logical part of your brain. So when you do this, I think of it as you're becoming the CEO of your feelings. You're becoming more in control. You're taking that stuff that's swirling around that feels uncertain and you're making it feel more concrete and certain. And by doing that, it's more manageable. It's also another really powerful process that undergirds this is the process of sense making. So, tons of research has found that when we can make sense of difficult events, when we can derive meaning from them, we are able to cope better and grow from them, and we're no longer traumatized by them. There's amazing studies with Holocaust victims on this, for example. By sense making, I don't mean making it okay what happened to you, but understanding it better, that experience. And so when you put words onto paper or when you dictate them. There's not even anyone on the other side. You naturally impose a story structure. It's something that's what we humans do naturally. It's not that you're making a happy ending or something deliberate. It's just you naturally sequence it in a story like way, and that helps you make sense of it. And what I love about this is that you don't even have to try. Like, you don't have to say, oh, I got to tell a story. I got to make a sense of this. All you have to do is write down on paper the words. That's all you have to do, and it's so powerful. And then there's more studies, of course, that if you have an empathic listener, it's a supercharged effect. It's even stronger, these effects.
Leslie, if listeners embraced revealing just a little bit more, what would be the biggest
Mm.
change that they see in their lives?
The biggest advantage? Okay. The advantages would be feeling more at home with yourself, gaining self-awareness for one, because in order for you to share your feelings, I encountered this also while I was writing the book that, wait, I don't even know what my feelings are. I've got a tool in my book to help with that, which is one that you can see everywhere on the internet. The one that I customized for my book is even more remedial because I needed the remedial help in knowing how I felt. So, self awareness, feeling comfortable at home in your shoes is just so important. Beyond that, of course, well being, mental, physical well being, stronger relationships, stronger, more intimate relationships, more influence even. That was one that really surprised me, right? These all this research we've done, and when leaders share a bit more, it causes people to trust them more and follow their leadership even more. So there's all these benefits in really all swaths of life.
Leslie, it was such a great discussion today. Thank you so much for coming to discuss your book, Revealing the Science and Power of Opening Up. It was such an honor to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.